You know, I think this might have been a bad idea. It's been a while since I've got in front of the camera and talked with you guys, because I haven't had time. And I haven't seen anything that's elicited much of a response out of me, giving me a whole lot of talking points. And this one does. Ready Player One is very, whether you love it or hate it, the movie. It's a very, it's a milestone of a movie, because I don't think I've seen so much collaboration into a movie since Who Framed Roger Rabbit. When Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out, no one had ever seen Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny on the same screen talking to each other before. And that was mind-blowing. That has nothing to do with being like a quote-unquote nerd. It was a symbol of different studios coming together, working together for a common thing. And while I don't necessarily know if that's exactly what happened behind the scenes with Ready Player One, it's certainly a hallmark back to that, because you'll see things on screen that you would never in a million years thought you would see interacting with each other. Wreck-It Ralph kind of had that going on, but they were none of the like cross-universe characters were ever like central to the plots or a device of some kind. It was literally just a cameo, and that was about it. But the reason why I say that this might not have been a good idea is because when I walked out of the theater, I was feeling to myself, this is probably going to be my best movies of the year. This is going to be my favorite movie of the year. And the moment I started applying even a little bit of thought to it, even on the way to the car, the movie starts to not fall apart, but pieces of it start to chip away. And you can see some of the dry paint underneath it. So far, I do still stand that this is one of the better movies I've seen this year, certainly. But I wouldn't hail it as the second coming of Steven Spielberg or something like that. And Spielberg, this is one of his more rewatchable movies, is what I'll say. It's not one of his best. Jaws is still out there. E.T. is still out there. I actually even think the BFG from last year is overall a better finished project than Ready Player One is. Now, again, between the two, if I was given the choice, which would I rather rewatch? Probably Ready Player One. If for no other reason that now I can go through and look at all the little Easter eggs that I missed before, but Ready Player One kind of suffers from what I call the Batman syndrome, where your central character is a good center pull for everything else, but all the other characters in the universe are far more interesting. Batman is a good character, but the Joker and Two-Face and Scarecrow, they're all far more interesting and memorable. They threaten to outshine him in a lot of his movies. Similarly, in Ready Player One, Walt, I think was his name, or Wade. His name is Wade. They get the bare essentials to his character down. In fact, in one moment, there was a rather lazy bit of narration where the camera literally just pulls in on his face, and you see how sad he is, and you hear his narration tell about what happened with his family. And it's efficient, but it's very boring. It feels like what he's saying, the backstory of his family, it sounds very important. And I'm curious why Spielberg decided to have this important bit of backstory be portrayed to the audience as just listing it off like a grocery list. But we'll come back to the family bit in a minute. They kind of have the thing going on of where he's like with the Last Starfighter, where he's a fish out, like he's just bland enough that you can kind of project yourself onto him, except that that doesn't work as well when he's surrounded by way more interesting characters. H and the other two, I can't remember right now. Samantha. So I could watch Samantha. I could watch a movie just about her all by herself, to be perfectly honest. And then there's his values with family. So he lives in what is essentially the slums. It's a 2045, that's the year it's set in, 2045 version of the slums. Everyone has this VR headset into the Oasis. I kind of question the availability of, you know, high-tech merch like that to the slums, but, you know, maybe they had a coupon day or something. It's Easter egg. It's neither here nor there. What is not there is consistency with Wade's values in terms of family. He seems really torn up that his aunt or what have you, or niece, either his aunt or his mother is seeing this guy who's a real jerk, and he spends the family's money on game upgrades and things like that. He lounges around, he's lazy, he's kind of violent, you know, whatever. He doesn't like him. Wade doesn't like this guy, and he wants her to, you know, she could do better. And then for the rest of the movie, they don't do anything with this concern that he has for his family. It just kind of gets dropped. It's mentioned one time in one line way later on, but there's been no connecting tissue between the two scenes. It doesn't, when he suddenly is, when you first meet him, he's concerned about it, and then he doesn't go, he has an hour or so without mentioning it, and then he throws out a line like it's suddenly really important. It feels thrown out of left field. It makes me wonder if there was supposed to be more scenes with the family and they cut it because the movie is already really long and you have a lot going on with this Oasis Matrix world and getting the keys and all that. Or if perhaps lines were just cut from the script entirely. The script is probably the biggest issue with Ready Player One. And it isn't even necessarily bad, it's just, by regular movie standards, it's solid. But because it's a Spielberg movie, I can't help but kind of hold it to a higher standard than the rest. And by Spielberg standards, it's weaker, not the weakest, just a little bit weaker. It's a little shakier than the rest. The bit with Wade, he's a kind of a dull character. His family values are picked up and dropped and picked up and dropped throughout the movie. He plays this game, the Oasis. Everybody plays this game, the Oasis. You know, it's World of Warcraft, but blown up for everybody. You know, everybody plays it. There's no limitation on, or there's no negative connotation with being a nerd or anything like that. You can just play it. You know, what have you. It's basic. It's very much like if you've ever seen Summer Wars. It's very much like the digital world in that, you know, he meets friends online. He makes friends online, which, you know, we typically do. You know, that's a thing that happens nowadays. But he makes 3 friends. They're all introduced in way more interesting ways than Wade's backstory is introduced. But anywho, they're all introduced, and then later on in the film, he meets them all in real life. And they all live in the same city as him. I'm sorry, the odds of that happening are... The odds of that happening, actually, it makes it, by comparison, it makes it seem more plausible that Anakin Skywalker built C-3PO and then years later just so happened to run into him again as Darth Vader. Like, as astronomical as that was, it seems plausible when you think about the fact that, like, the Ready Player One is putting out that this game being played by everyone on the planet, we're talking billions of people, he makes friends with 3 of them over the internet, or I'm sorry, 4 of them, and they all just so happen to live within walking distance of his house. Like, that seems incredibly coincidental. Especially, and really, 2 of them, the 2 with less amount of lines, they didn't need to meet him in person. They could have met him over like a video phone or video conference, and it would have had just as much impact because they don't really need to physically be there in any of the scenes that they're in. The other 2 definitely do, but and And I'd be more willing to buy that one of them lived nearby and then contacted the other one and, conference. But anyway, I'm just saying that it seems a little too coincidental. And when things seem coincidental in a script, that usually begets laziness in writing. Either they couldn't think of another way to get the results that they wanted, or they just weren't thinking about it, or there wasn't a second screenwriter to look at this stuff and filter it through. And really, I mean, those are the only real weaknesses in the movie. Everything, if I haven't mentioned anything else, it's because there's nothing wrong with it. Janusz Kaminski comes back as the director of photography. He worked with Spielberg on Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, and you can kind of tell in some parts because when there's long winding shots of things, what I think of specifically is in Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls, when Indy's fighting the big buff dude and the army ants are coming after them. There's a couple of shots there that reminisce very strongly with some of the chase scenes in Ready Player One. But, I mean, yeah, like I said, I don't really have a whole lot of other issues with the movie. It's just that the writing seemed a little bit... To my knowledge, this is one of the few times, with the exception of, like, Jaws or something like that, or Jurassic Park as well, and BFG. Actually, you know what? Take it back. I was about to give Spielberg a little bit of credit and say he hasn't done a whole lot of adaptations, so we should cut him some slack. But actually, he's done a lot of adaptations, so never mind. But it is still solid, and outside of the what Red Letter Media would refer to as I clapped when I saw it. Those moments. There is a solid foundation there. I just, if you wanted it to be, there's a potential for it to be a little bit better, just in terms of tightening up the screws on your main character. I'd be willing to let the inconsistencies and the kind of lazy writing with the other plot points go if your main character is a little more fun and interesting to watch. On top of that, I didn't find the main guy's performance all that invigorating. He was also in the more recent X-Men First Class movies, like the new series they've been doing, the one that wasn't that good, Apocalypse. He was Cyclops in that movie. I didn't recognize him at first because, as Cyclops, his face is covered like this half the movie. But then a few shots later, when he's wearing the VR gear, he was going like this. I kind of was like, I think I actually recognize him a little bit. And yeah, I looked it up later, sure enough. Best performances in the movie were Olivia Cooke as Samantha. I can never remember his name, the bad guy, the guy who runs the IOI industry. I always enjoy him. He's got a good presence. TJ Miller's TJ Miller, in a good way, but I mean, it's also kind of what you expect from him. And the gentleman who played Holiday, or the creator of the Oasis, there is a very nuanced, underplayed performance. He reminded me quite a bit of the young lady in Neon Demon, who was the more vivacious, the more ambitious of the three models. That wasn't Miss Fanning, because they both left. Okay, battery died partway through. Gonna have to wrap this up quickly because my camera is a piece of shit. Long story short, Ready Player One is great. You should see it. I think you would enjoy it, unless you have perhaps read the books. I've heard of some of the changes they made. You should go into it. By now, you should just be going into book adaptations with the affidavit that it's going to be different. Things have to change when you adapt things. So, go into it with an open mind, but also be aware that you might be mad. Also a quick shout out. Spielberg, I appreciate that you're coming back to doing more adult-ish kind of movies. They drop an F-bomb in this movie. And there was a period where Spielberg was too afraid to do anything that was slightly mature or dark in any way, shape, or form. And I missed that. So, it's part of the reason why Crystal Skull sucked, among many things. But anyway, Ready Player One is a great movie. It is probably going to be one of the better movies I end up seeing this year. Just has a couple of loose ends I would have liked to have seen tightened up, but they're not deal breakers. Hey, catch you next time. I gotta stop doing that. That's fucking stupid.